It started with a single text meant for someone else sent in a moment of quiet desperation. A struggling single father, a newborn daughter, and a message that should have been ignored, but wasn't. What followed wasn't luck. It wasn't charity. It was something deeper, something that would unfold across state lines, time, and memory. Sometimes the smallest mistakes lead us exactly where we need to be. If you believe in second chances, quiet heroes, and the unseen kindness that still exists in this world, you're in the right place. Take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss these deeply human stories. Stories that just might stay with you long after they end. Now, let me tell you what really happened. What? A struggling single dad texted the CEO by mistake, asking for help to feed his infant daughter. The last can of baby formula sat on the kitchen counter like a ticking clock. Jack Morgan stood in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at it as if it might multiply if he looked long enough. Ella's cries echoed down the hall, insistent, rising in pitch with every minute he didn't appear with her bottle. He wiped his hands on his jeans that hadn't fit right since he'd lost weight he didn't have to spare, and walked back into the nursery. His daughter lay red-faced in her crib, fists clenched, cheeks damp. Jack scooped her up gently, whispering, "I know, sweetheart. I'm working on it." He cradled her with practiced ease, pacing the narrow room, as if motion might soothe them both. The shelves were tidy, he kept them that way, but the neatness didn't hide the scarcity. One last clean bottle, one scoop left in the can, and no money in the bank until Friday. If nothing changed tomorrow night, he'd be feeding her water and prayers. Jack had been a proud man once. Not boastful, he didn't care for show-offs, but proud of earning his keep, of being someone his neighbors could count on. A reliable hand, an honest mechanic, a husband until cancer stole that title from him. Now he was just trying to hold together what was left. He set Ella down in her bouncer chair, popped in a pacifier, and returned to the kitchen. The formula sat where he'd left it, stubbornly unreplicated. He glanced at his phone. No new deposits, no alerts, just silence and static. Then he remembered something. The drawer, third one down in the old side table near the garage door. Jack walked to it, pulled it open. Loose batteries, expired coupons, an old key with no door, and there it was, folded in yellowed, nearly forgotten, a receipt from 7 years ago, handwritten across the back. "Jack, if you ever need anything at all, call me. I owe you. Daryl 91 Sarnavi 8417. He'd almost tossed it a dozen times. He hadn't. Daryl was a kid then, barely 20, dumped by his girlfriend and out on the street. Jack had let him stay in the shed behind the garage, fed him sandwiches and dignity when no one else would. Daryl left 3 weeks later with a new job, a clean shirt, and a promise. Jack had never called in that debt, until now. He typed the number into his phone, double-checking it. The last digit was it a 7 or a 1. The ink had blurred. He guessed. Then his thumbs hovered over the screen. What could he even say? He didn't want pity, didn't want to seem weak. But this wasn't about pride. This was about Ella, and he would walk across fire for her. He typed, "Hey, I know it's been a long time. I never thought I'd ask this, but I'm in a rough spot. My baby daughter needs formula, and I'm short until Friday. If there's any way you can spot me $40, I swear I'll pay you back. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important." Jack, he stared at it for a full minute. Then, teeth clenched, he hit send. He waited, pacing again, checking the screen. Nothing. Ella had drifted into a light sleep. Jack returned to her side, just watching, heart tight with guilt. Maybe the number was wrong. Maybe Daryl had changed phones. Or maybe... The screen lit up. "I think you have the wrong number." Jack blinked. The name on the thread read simply Olivia Newphone. His heart sank. Wrong number. Of course. Maybe it was a 7, not a 1. His shot in the dark had landed in someone else's pocket. He typed back, "Sorry. I thought this was someone I helped out years ago. I must have misread the number. Please ignore." He turned the phone face down on the counter and pressed his palms against his temples. This was stupid. He shouldn't have asked. He should have just figured something out. A minute passed, then 2. The phone buzzed again. "Wait, are you saying you helped someone and they gave you this number to call in case you ever needed help?" Jack frowned, hesitated, then typed, "Yeah. Guy named Daryl. I gave him a place to stay once when he was in bad shape. I never asked for anything. But now, I've got a baby. I'm out of formula, and I'm tired of pretending I can handle everything alone. There was a long pause. Jack could feel the silence pressing through the walls. Then another message. How old is your daughter? He stared at the question. Should he even answer? 6 months? Her name's Ella. What's your address? Jack's brow furrowed. Who was this woman? Why was she still texting? He hesitated. Was this a scam, a setup? Then he looked at Ella again, her tiny fists, her trusting breath. He typed the address, hit send, then immediately regretted it. No reply came. The next morning, Jack heard a knock on the door. It was barely 8:00 a.m. On his porch sat a sealed brown box. No delivery label, no name. He opened it. Inside were 2 cans of top-quality formula, a pack of diapers, and a folded card. No signature. Just a note in graceful feminine handwriting. I'm not the person you were trying to reach, but I think you reached someone you were meant to. Take care of your daughter. I'll take care of the resto. Jack stared at it, breath caught in his chest. He didn't know who O was, but in that moment it didn't matter. For the first time in months, someone had seen him, not judged, not walked away, just helped. And somewhere, someone named Olivia, who he had never met and who knew nothing of him, had reminded Jack that even when the world goes quiet, a stranger's kindness could still make a sound loud enough to save a life. The phone buzzed once, then fell still on the oak nightstand. Olivia Hanley rolled over her hand, brushing against the glass screen. She squinted at the clock, 12:47 a.m., and groaned. She'd told herself this weekend at the Vermont cabin would be a true escape. No emails, no fires to put out. Just trees, snow, and silence. She didn't recognize the number. Area code from New Jersey. She almost set the phone back down, but the message preview caught her eye. Hey, I know it's been a long time. I never thought I'd ask this, but I'm in a rough spot. She sat up straighter, the chill from the window seeping through the flannel sheets. She unlocked the phone and read the full message. Her brows pulled together as she scrolled slowly over the words. A father, a baby, a request for $40. She'd seen all sorts of messages in her years as CEO pitches schemes, even blackmail. But this was different. There was no link, no account number, no demand. The message was quiet, earnest, too human to be written by a scammer. Still, she typed, I think you have the wrong number. She waited a beat, then put the phone down. It buzzed again. Sorry, I thought this was someone I helped out years ago. I must have misread the number. Please ignore. Olivia stared at the ceiling. The wind rustled outside the cabin. In the firelight, shadows danced along the knotty pine walls. She could have gone back to sleep. Should have, but she didn't. Instead, she opened the message thread again, reread the apology. There was no follow-up, no desperate plea. Whoever he was, he hadn't meant to burden her. That in itself was rare. She tapped her screen again, then typed, Wait, are you saying you helped someone and they gave you this number to call in case you ever needed help? The reply came slower this time. A pause, then, Yeah, guy named Daryl. I gave him a place to stay once when he was in bad shape. I never asked for anything. But now, I've got a baby. I'm out of formula. And I'm tired of pretending I can handle everything alone. Olivia held the phone to her chest for a moment. There were people in the world who would rather break than bend. She knew she'd been one of them. For years, she clawed her way up, refusing to ask for help. That instinct born of pride or fear she couldn't say. But this man, whoever he was, had chosen his daughter's well-being over his pride. And that meant something. She typed again. How old is your daughter? 6 months. Her name's Ella. Ella. There was something unbearably tender in that name. Short, bright, like hope pressed into 2 syllables. She hesitated, then sent, What's your address? She half expected him not to reply. But a moment later, the address came through. A modest street in a tired New Jersey neighborhood. She recognized the zip code not far from where one of her warehouses used to be. Olivia stared at the address as if it might reveal more. She tapped her finger against her lip, debating. Then she got up, threw on her wool cardigan, and padded barefoot to the small kitchen at the back of the cabin. There she opened her laptop. She hadn't planned on using it this weekend, but some things didn't wait. She placed an online order formula diapers, a few essentials. She selected overnight delivery and added a handwritten note option. It asked for a name. She left only an initial O. The next evening, Olivia stood outside on the porch cradling a mug of tea, snow falling in hushed flurries around her. The pine trees behind the cabin swayed gently, their outlines soft under the twilight. Her phone buzzed. A message. She hadn't expected one. "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but you didn't have to do that. You didn't even ask for anything back. Thank you." She smiled, though her eyes prickled with something unexpected. She typed slowly, "You're welcome. Take care of Ella. The rest, let it work itself out." Then she slid the phone into her coat pocket and stepped further out onto the porch. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt the weight in her chest shift. Lighten. There was something about helping someone who couldn't repay you. No spotlight, no charity write-off. Just kindness. She wasn't sure why she'd sent the package. Maybe it was because she remembered a winter long ago when her foster mother couldn't afford formula and watered it down to stretch it until a stranger knocked at their door with a box. No explanation, no return address. Olivia had never forgotten that day. The milk had tasted sweet, not because it was flavored, but because it was enough. Now maybe she'd become someone else's version of that stranger. She looked up at the snow-blurred sky and whispered, "Wherever you are, thank you. I finally paid it forward." Back inside, Olivia sat at the fire, her hands warming around the mug. She didn't know the man's name yet. Didn't need to. He had a baby named Ella and a tired honesty in his voice. That was enough to remind her that not all things that fall apart have to stay broken. There were second chances, even in the smallest, strangest ways. She stared into the flames, the note she'd written still echoing in her mind. "Take care of your daughter. I'll take care of the rest." For tonight, that was enough. Jack didn't sleep much that night. Even after feeding Ella with the new formula, richer, smoother than the store brand he usually bought, his body remained rigid alert. The unopened diapers, the fresh pacifiers, the handwritten note that now sat tucked into his kitchen cabinet, they should have brought relief, but they brought questions too. And Jack Morgan was a man who didn't like questions without answers. He held Ella long after she fell asleep, rocking gently in the worn armchair by the window, his mind running in circles. Who sends supplies to a stranger who signs a note with just an O? A scam artist wouldn't drop a box off without asking for something. There'd be fine print, a catch, but there had been none. Jack stared out at the streetlight outside his window. Snow was beginning to gather again on the cracked pavement. He shifted Ella in his arms and whispered, "What do you think, huh? Think we just met a guardian angel." Ella snored softly, completely unimpressed by the miracle. At 6:17 a.m., with sunlight beginning to dilute the gray sky, Jack did something he rarely allowed himself. He texted back, "I never got your name, but I wanted to say thank you. I don't get help like that. Ever." He watched the message go through finger, hovering above the screen. He wasn't expecting a response. In fact, part of him hoped there wouldn't be one. Let the mystery be. Don't push your luck. But the reply came less than a minute later. "I'm Olivia." That was it. Simple. No last name, no title. Jack swallowed hard. The name didn't ring a bell. Not really. He hesitated, then typed again, "Olivia. You don't know me. You didn't have to help. That meant a lot. More than I know how to say." Her response took longer this time. "I know I didn't have to, but sometimes doing the right thing doesn't need a reason. I've been on your side of the fence before." Jack stared at the screen. The phrasing, the tone, not pity, not superiority, just understanding. "You've been out of formula," before he asked, adding a smile emoji at the end, hoping humor might keep the exchange light. "Not formula," she replied, "but food, heat, stability. I know what it's like to count down hours until help arrives." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. So she wasn't just a rich stranger doing a good deed for fun. She knew. "Well, Jack typed, Ella and I are grateful. She cried less last night than she has in days. I think she knows she's drinking the good stuff." "That's a smart girl," Olivia replied. "She's got a good father." Jack stared at the sentence. His chest tightened, not with pride, but with the ache of hearing words he hadn't allowed himself to believe. Was he a good father? Most days he felt like a man barely holding the seams together. His house was clean, yes. He cooked, he changed diapers, he took on weekend auto jobs when he could. But love didn't pay bills, and exhaustion didn't win awards. Still, her words warmed something raw in him. "I'm just trying," he replied. "Trying is what makes you good." That one sentence sat with him for a long while. Later that morning, he walked Ella to the small neighborhood park a few blocks away. The air was crisp and snow clung to the playground fence in jagged white patches. Ella's face peeked out from the blue knit cap his late wife had made. He cradled her close in the sling across his chest, sitting on a bench that creaked beneath his weight. He tapped his phone again. "Why did you keep texting?" Most people would have stopped after the first message. The response came just as he was bouncing Ella gently on his knee. "Because I remember what it felt like to be invisible." That stopped him cold. He looked down at his daughter. Her eyes were wide open now, watching the sky. She gurgled softly. Jack swallowed the lump in his throat. "You're not invisible," he wrote back. "Not anymore." He didn't know why he said it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something deeper, something he saw reflected in himself. The woman on the other end of those messages hadn't just offered a box of supplies. She'd offered the one thing Jack hadn't known he needed: connection. Real, human, unfiltered. That night, after Ella was asleep again, Jack sat at the kitchen table staring at his phone. The note from the box lay in front of him, corners curled slightly. He picked it up, reread the words. "Take care of your daughter. I'll take care of the rest." "Oh." His fingers hovered over the screen again. "Can I ask what you do for a living?" There was a pause, a long one. "Then I run a company. It's complicated." Jack chuckled. "Aren't they all mind makes baby food and formula?" His eyebrows lifted. The pieces clicked together. "Wait, you're that Olivia Hanley?" "Yes." He blinked, sat back in his chair. The Hanley nutrition label was on the very can he'd just fed to Ella. Jack exhaled. Somehow the image he'd built in his mind, a kind, down-to-earth woman who helped a stranger because she'd once been one, didn't match the glossy CEO profiles he'd occasionally seen on TV. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the world didn't need more polished people. Maybe it needed more quiet kindness. He smiled. "You're full of surprises, Olivia Hanley. You have no idea," she wrote back. And neither of them in that moment had any idea just how true that would become. The third knock was what finally pulled Jack from the half-sleep he'd been drifting in and out of. It was just past 8, too early for deliveries and too late for emergencies. He rubbed his eyes, instinctively checked on Ella, still asleep in her crib, one chubby arm thrown over her head like a tiny queen in repose, then moved toward the front door. He opened it to the sharp bite of morning air. The street was quiet, blanketed with a light layer of snow that crunched underfoot. And there it was, a box, brown, medium-sized, sitting squarely on the top step of his porch. No Amazon logo, no FedEx tape, no address label either. Just a neat strip of brown paper sealing it shut. Jack stepped outside, brow furrowed. He looked up and down the street, nothing but still cars and an old man walking his dog 3 houses down. No delivery van, no footsteps in the snow. He crouched slowly, lifting the box with both hands. It wasn't heavy, but it wasn't empty either. He carried it inside, placed it gently on the table, and stared at it like it might whisper secrets. Then he opened it. 2 large cans of Hanley Premium Infant Formula, a brand new package of size 2 diapers, a pack of baby wipes, a pacifier with a floral print, and a folded envelope cream-colored with no name on the front, just a single capital letter O. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside was a card, no branding, just a blank inside with a few lines in clean, confident handwriting. "You don't owe me anything. Take care of your daughter. I'll take care of the rest." "Oh." Jack sat down slowly, the card still in his hand. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint, familiar creak of the old heater kicking on. He didn't know what emotion to land on: relief, awe, suspicion, gratitude. Maybe it was all of them. Maybe that's what it felt like when the world just for a moment didn't forget you existed. This wasn't charity. It didn't feel like pity. It felt intentional. He looked over at Ella's room. She was stirring now, her coos starting to rise like the beginning of a song. He smiled. "Looks like your fairy godmother came through," he whispered. Later that morning, Jack made a bottle with the new formula. The texture was smoother, the smell richer. Ella took it with wide-eyed approval, her tiny hands gripping the bottle like it was treasure. Jack watched her drink with the same reverence one might offer a sacred ritual. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't calculating ounces against his next paycheck, and yet, it still gnawed at him. Who was Olivia really, not just in name or title, but in heart? What kind of person received a text from a stranger and responded not with silence or skepticism, but with help? He opened his phone and tapped the message thread. "Olivia, I got the package. Thank you isn't enough," she replied within a minute. "You're welcome. I'm glad it got there before the snow picked up." Jack paused. Her tone was warm, not forced, not distant. He typed, "You didn't have to do all that. I keep trying to figure out what kind of person just does that." "The kind who once had someone do it for her," she answered. Jack read the sentence 3 times. He could feel her in the words, not just the meaning, but the memory behind them. He didn't ask for more. He didn't need to. Instead, he replied, "You've made things better here than you realize." Ella's sleeping deeper, smiling more. It's like she feels the difference. "Babies are good at sensing safety," Olivia wrote. "I wish someone had told me that when I was little." Jack leaned back in the chair, letting her words wash over him. There was something in her tone, bittersweet, almost hidden, that made him wonder what kind of childhood she'd had. But he didn't press. He respected boundaries. Always had. Instead, he said, "You've done more than enough. I hope someone's doing the same for you." "They aren't," she wrote. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe I get to be the one doing it now." Jack stared at the message, the weight of it settling into his chest like a truth he'd always known, but never spoken. Maybe the people who'd walked through fire came out the other side with a kind of responsibility. Maybe kindness wasn't something you owed. Maybe it was something you passed along. He took a picture of Ella, cheeks full and eyes bright, holding her new pacifier. He sent it to Olivia. "This is who you helped." There was a pause. "She's beautiful," Olivia responded, "and lucky." Jack didn't reply immediately. He stared at Ella's photo on the screen, then back at the real thing sleeping now in the crook of his arm. "I think I'm the lucky one," he finally typed. There was no response right away. But that was okay. Some conversations didn't need constant words to feel full. That night, after putting Ella down for bed, Jack sat at the table with a pen and paper. He wasn't sure what he was writing yet, a letter maybe. Something real, not typed, not fast, just human. He began, "Dear Olivia, I didn't know people like you still existed, the kind who hear a stranger's voice and choose to listen instead of turning away. The kind who don't ask questions before they give. I've spent months feeling invisible, but now for the first time in a long time I don't. You reminded me that maybe there's still light at the edges of this world. Thank you for seeing me, for seeing Ella, for reminding me that not everything is broken. With gratitude, Jack." He folded the letter, unsure if he'd ever send it, but writing it made something shift inside. Tomorrow he thought he'd start fixing the broken heater in the spare room. Maybe repaint Ella's nursery, and maybe, just maybe, he'd let himself hope. Because someone out there had reminded him in the quietest, kindest way possible that hope was still allowed. Jack's phone buzzed as he was elbow deep under the hood of a rusted-out Subaru. It was a weekend gig off the books, $50 cash for a basic battery swap and belt replacement. He didn't usually take side work on Sundays, but since Ella had slept through the night and the forecast called for sun, he figured it was worth the strain. He wiped his hands on an old rag, glanced at the screen. A new email. Subject line, order confirmation, Hanley Nutrition. His brow furrowed. He hadn't placed any new order. He tapped it open with a grease-stained thumb. "Dear Jack Morgan, thank you for your continued trust in Hanley Nutrition. As a valued customer, your shipment has been processed and delivered. We hope you and your child are enjoying our premium infant blend. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Hanley Nutrition Customer Care Team." Jack stared at the words. Continued trust shipment. It was a system-generated message clearly tied to the box Olivia had arranged. Somehow his name had been added to a customer list, but he'd never entered it, never placed an order. He flipped the hood down and stood in the driveway, the morning air suddenly colder than before. Hanley Nutrition. That was Olivia's company. He remembered her saying it in a message almost offhand. But what kind of CEO personally sent out formula or left handwritten notes? He hadn't thought much of it then, but now the puzzle pieces tugged at the edge of his attention. Back home after feeding Ella and putting her down for her nap, Jack sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open. He'd inherited the ancient Dell from his late brother. It groaned every time it powered on, but it worked. He typed Olivia Hanley into the search bar. The results popped up instantly. There she was, smiling on magazine covers, flanked by other executives at conferences delivering TED-style talks about sustainable nutrition and early childhood wellness. But more than the titles and accolades, Jack noticed her eyes. Even in high-resolution, perfectly staged photos, they held something watchful, guarded, like someone who had learned too much too early. He clicked on a Forbes article. Her background was outlined plainly: foster care in upstate New York, bounced between homes, got a scholarship to Cornell, worked her way up from the marketing department of a regional food brand to CEO of Hanley Nutrition before age 35. Now 38, she was one of the youngest women to lead a top 5 nutrition company in the U.S. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. That was the woman who sent formula to a stranger at midnight, no assistant, no PR team, just her. Jack rubbed his chin. It didn't add up. Or maybe it added up in a way that was rare, uncomfortable even. A CEO who hadn't forgotten what it felt like to be hungry. And yet what stayed with him most wasn't the article or the accolades or the sharp suits she wore in every image. It was the tone in her messages. No trace of superiority, no savior complex. Just someone who had been where he was and knew how much that mattered. He opened their message thread again. His last message had been the photo of Ella. Her reply still sat there. She's beautiful and lucky. He hadn't said anything since. But now he typed, I just realized who you are. I saw the email confirmation from Hanley. Then I looked you up. Honestly, I didn't expect any of this. The reply came 15 minutes later. You're not the first to say that. Jack smiled. It was a simple sentence, but laced with something deeper. She was used to being underestimated, or misunderstood, or maybe both. He typed again, why me? This time the pause was longer. He put his phone down, rinsed the bottles in the sink, and tidied the living room before it buzzed again. Because when I needed help, someone chose me. No application, no paperwork. Just saw me and said, you matter. That changed everything. Jack sat with the phone in his palm. He remembered a similar moment years ago when an old man at the auto shop had handed him a paid tuition slip for a 6-month certification course. I see something in you, son, the man had said. Jack had never told anyone, but that one act had given him the skills to support his family, at least until his wife got sick. Then I'm honored to be part of your chain, he wrote, and I won't break it. There was no response right away, but it didn't feel unfinished. That evening, Jack took Ella for a walk around the neighborhood. He liked the dusk hours, the way the world quieted down just before dinner, the sound of sprinklers clicking, the smell of someone grilling onions a block over. As they rounded the corner, a neighbor, Mrs. Harrell, stepped onto her porch and waved. She's getting so big, she said, smiling at Ella. Too fast, Jack replied. She's already plotting her escape, I can tell. The older woman chuckled and leaned in. She's lucky to have a daddy who dotes on her like you do. Jack offered a soft smile, the compliment brushing against something still fragile inside. Lucky. People kept saying that. Maybe it was true, but maybe he was the one being rescued more than he realized. That night after Ella had gone down easy, Jack sat at the table and looked at the unopened email again. He hovered over the sender's name, Hanley Nutrition, and clicked reply. He kept it short. To whom it may concern, I just wanted to say thank you. The shipment you sent made a world of difference for my daughter. If there's any way I can pay this forward, be part of your outreach, I'd be honored to know more. Sincerely, Jack Morgan. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. Then he looked down at the small piece of paper Olivia had written, the one with the letter O still taped inside the kitchen cabinet. A reminder that even when life falls apart, sometimes a stranger reaches through the rubble and hands you a light. And that light has a name. Now he knew it, and he wasn't going to let it fade. The fire crackled softly in the Vermont cabin, sending waves of warmth against the cold windows. Olivia sat curled in a blanket on the leather armchair, her laptop resting on her knees, open but untouched. The email from Jack, simple, sincere, and completely unexpected, sat at the top of her inbox waiting for a response. If there's any way I can pay this forward, be part of your outreach, I'd be honored to know more. She reread the line for the third time. He wasn't asking for more help. He wasn't trying to ride a wave of sympathy. He just wanted to give back. It was the kind of gesture she rarely saw anymore, especially not from people who had every right to be asking for more. Her cursor hovered over reply, but something tugged at her. A thought. A thread loose dangling somewhere at the back of her mind. Jack Morgan. That name. She tilted her head and stared out the frost-ringed window, her breath slowing. There was something familiar there, like a song she used to know, but couldn't quite hum. And then it came. Suddenly. Sharply. 15 years ago, early fall. She had been 23, fresh out of grad school, driving her dying Toyota Corolla through central New Jersey. She had taken the scenic route, hoping to catch some breath before her first real job interview, entry-level marketing at a local food distributor. The car had made it 90 miles before the front tire blew. She had no spare, no cell signal, and absolutely no clue what she was doing. She remembered pacing the side of the road, panic rising in her throat. No money, no friends nearby, just her and the crows overhead mocking. And then him. A beat-up blue pickup truck had pulled over. A man stepped out, mid-30s, tall, with a quiet, kind presence. He didn't talk much, just nodded, took out a jack, and within 20 minutes had changed the tire and topped off her radiator while she stood there hugging herself in embarrassment. She had tried to offer him the $40 in her wallet. He had refused, smiling just once. Just get where you need to go. And when you're in a position to help someone else, remember today. She had written it down in her journal that night in a motel room. Not the man's full name, just the words, Jack Auto Shop, red flannel, quiet kindness. She hadn't thought of it in years. But now goosebumps rose on her arms. She sprang from the chair and crossed to the corner bookshelf. It was there, tucked between old copies of Harvard Business Review and a worn binder of product launch data, her old journals. She flipped one open, fingers trembling slightly, scanned until she saw the words. Ocotillo 12th, New Jersey. Jack, garage owner. Fixed my car, wouldn't take money. Said, when you're in a position to help someone else, remember today. I will. God, I will. She sat back hard, breath caught. It was him, Jack Morgan, the same man who texted by accident, the same man holding a baby girl in his arms and trying to stay afloat, the same man who had already saved her once and didn't even remember. The cabin spun gently around her. The fire snapped behind her like punctuation. She had thought she was paying forward someone else's kindness, but she was repaying his. The next morning she walked through the snow-dusted woods near the cabin, needing air. The branches above her stretched like aching limbs toward the pale sky. Her boots crunched in steady rhythm, but her thoughts scattered with every step. She debated telling him. Part of her felt it would embarrass him, or worse, make him feel like he owed her something. But the other part felt like he deserved to know that his one small kindness 15 years ago had lived on, that it had bloomed quietly in 100 other acts that followed. Her foundation, her food donation programs, even the Hanley Hope clinics that had launched last year in rural counties, born of her memory of what it felt like to have nothing. And he was the seed. Back at the cabin, she opened her laptop and stared at Jack's name again. She didn't reply to the email right away. Not yet. Instead, she opened the internal platform for the company's upcoming campaign, Real Families. Real Stories. It was her personal initiative highlight, ordinary people making extraordinary choices for the sake of their children. She scrolled through the applicant list, then paused. Her assistant had quietly submitted a nomination on her behalf, Jack Morgan. She hadn't even known. There he was, a picture of Jack holding Ella in a sling outside a neighborhood park. He wasn't smiling in the traditional sense, but there was something radiant in the way he looked down at his daughter. Complete presence, complete love. Her heart clenched. She clicked approve on his nomination. Then, hesitating only a second, she added a note. This applicant is a priority. I'd like to reach out personally. OH. Meanwhile, back in New Jersey, Jack opened his email to find a new message with a subject line that read, "You've been selected." He nearly deleted it, thinking it was spam. But then he saw the sender, Hanley Nutrition. He clicked. Dear Mr. Morgan, We are honored to inform you that you have been selected as a feature family for our upcoming campaign, Real Families, Real Stories. We believe your journey as a father reflects the kind of strength and integrity that inspires others. As part of this recognition, we would like to invite you and Ella to our headquarters in New York for a feature interview photography session and a small token of appreciation for sharing your story. Please reply if you are interested. Travel and accommodations will be arranged at no cost to you. Jack read it once, then twice. He leaned back in the chair and let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "You're not going to believe this, kiddo," he whispered, turning to Ella, who was lying on a blanket chewing one of her socks. "We're going to New York." He didn't know what awaited him there, but for the first time in years, it felt like something was opening, not falling apart, but falling into place. And somewhere far away in a cabin tucked into the woods, Olivia closed her laptop with a quiet smile. The circle had begun to close. The letter from Hanley Nutrition sat on Jack's kitchen table for the better part of a day. He'd read it 5 times, carefully, like someone trying to spot a hidden condition buried in the fine print. Each time the words stayed the same, gracious, respectful, almost reverent: an invitation, a flight, a hotel room, and a promise that nothing was expected in return except his presence and a bit of time. Jack had seen enough of the world to know that gifts usually came with strings, but this didn't feel like that. Still, the old voice in the back of his head, the one he thought he'd buried when Ella was born, whispered doubts. "They don't choose people like you for things like this." He paced the small living room while Ella played with a rattle on the carpet. The heater clicked in the wall, struggling against the creeping cold of late February. The refrigerator let out a low groan. Jack rubbed his arms and stared at the letter again. Then he looked at Ella. Her face was round with contentment, her eyes fixated on the little pink elephant in her hand. She had no idea that life was hard, that the world didn't always offer second chances. And maybe that was reason enough to go. That night, Jack messaged Olivia. "I got something today, from your company." "I don't really know what to say," she replied within minutes. "Say yes." He stared at the screen for a long time before typing. "Why me, Olivia? I'm not the kind of person who ends up on posters or websites. I'm a guy trying to keep the lights on and my daughter fed." Her answer came slower this time. "Because you're exactly the kind of person who should be seen. Because there are a lot of fathers out there doing exactly what you're doing, and they never get thanked. They never get acknowledged. You deserve more than silence." Jack read the message 3 times. He thought of all the nights he'd gone to bed unsure if he could afford gas and groceries in the same week. Of the first time he'd had to tell a customer he couldn't take a repair job because he had no tools anymore. Of the way strangers sometimes looked at Ella's secondhand stroller like it told them everything they needed to know about her future. And then he thought of the box on the porch, the handwritten note, the warmth that had slowly taken root inside him since that day. He replied with just 2 words, "We're in." 3 days later, Jack found himself at Newark Airport for the first time in nearly a decade. The last time he'd been there, he was 29, putting his wife on a plane to Arizona for a clinical trial that never worked. Now he had a baby strapped to his chest and a backpack with exactly 1 extra outfit for both of them. He was met at the gate by a kind-faced driver holding a sign that said, "Mr. Morgan." That alone made him laugh. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had called him Mr. without an overdue notice attached. The car was black, sleek, and smelled faintly of leather and lavender. Jack sat stiffly at first, unsure what to do with his hands. But Ella, comfortably nestled against him, cooed and tapped at the window as Manhattan unfolded outside. He couldn't lie, it was impressive. Big buildings, bright banners, streets alive with motion. It had a pulse all its own. They arrived at a boutique hotel in Soho, where a suite had been reserved under his name. The bellhop tried to take his bag, but Jack insisted on carrying it himself. He didn't need help. He needed to feel grounded. Still, when they opened the door to the sweet, king-sized bed crib, already waiting in the corner, a welcome basket filled with baby essentials and handwritten note that read, "We're honored you're here." His throat tightened. This wasn't pity, it was dignity. The next morning, Jack and Ella arrived at the Hanley Nutrition headquarters on the Upper West Side. The building was a towering glass structure, modern but welcoming, the lobby filled with soft light and gentle colors. A receptionist greeted him with warm eyes and a quiet, "We've been expecting you." He was ushered into a studio space where a small production team set up lights and mics with gentle professionalism. Nothing flashy, nothing forced. Just people who looked him in the eye and asked how Ella liked the formula. Jack answered all their questions honestly, how fatherhood had changed him, how he'd lost his job after the garage closed, how Ella had saved him in 1,000 small, silent ways. He didn't perform. He didn't pretend. He just spoke. When the shoot wrapped, one of the marketing directors handed him a bottle of water and said, "You speak like someone who remembers what matters." He wasn't sure what to say to that, so he just nodded. Then came the moment he hadn't expected. A private meeting. "Miss Hanley would like to meet you if you're comfortable," the assistant said, gesturing to a quiet lounge room nearby. Jack hesitated. He hadn't seen her in person. Not yet. Only the messages. Only the name. He adjusted Ella on his hip, took a breath, and walked in. The room was quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the park, and sitting there, poised, calm, hands folded in her lap, was Olivia Hanley. She stood when he entered. No fanfare, no business smile, just her. "Hi, Jack," she said softly. "It's good to finally meet you." Jack nodded, his throat too tight for words at first. "This is Ella," he managed, his voice lower than usual. Olivia's eyes warmed. "She's even more beautiful in person." They stood in silence for a beat longer than necessary. Then Olivia gestured to the couch. "Please sit. I know this has been a lot." He sat slowly, still holding Ella, who looked between them with curious eyes. "I wanted to thank you," Olivia said in person, "for being part of this campaign, for showing up, for being who you are." Jack smiled, tired but sincere. "Honestly," he said, "I don't know what I'm doing here. But I think maybe it's where I need to be." Olivia nodded. "So do I." And though neither of them said it aloud, something shifted between them in that quiet room, a recognition, an understanding that ran deeper than gratitude or charity. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of one. Jack couldn't decide if he was more relieved or unnerved by how easy Olivia was to talk to. She didn't speak like a CEO. She didn't act like one either. No flashy jargon, no prepackaged sound bites. Just a woman in a soft blue blouse and jeans, her sleeves casually rolled up, her hair tied back in a loose twist. She looked tired but not unkempt, polished but not untouchable. More than anything, she looked human. They sat in the lounge for nearly half an hour. Olivia asked gentle questions about Ella, her sleep habits, her favorite toy, how teething was going. Jack answered as best he could, and somewhere along the way, the nervousness in his gut began to ease. She wasn't evaluating him. She wasn't interviewing him. She was just listening. Still, he kept catching himself watching her too closely, wondering why she felt familiar in ways he couldn't quite place. Something about the cadence of her voice, the way she paused before speaking, as if measuring each word for weight rather than impact. At one point, Olivia looked at Ella, now snoozing in Jack's arms, pacifier bobbing gently, and smiled in a way that made her entire face soften. "She trusts you completely," Olivia said quietly. Jack glanced down at his daughter, then back up. "Yeah," he murmured, "which terrifies me sometimes." Olivia's eyes met his, steady and understanding. "That's how you know you're doing it right." Jack chuckled, low and tired. "You're full of those one-liners, aren't you?" She grinned, a little embarrassed. "Years of branding and ad copy. It seeps in." That broke the ice more than anything else had. Jack relaxed into the couch, adjusting Ella on his chest. So he said after a pause, "Do you meet all the families who show up for your campaigns in person? Or am I a special case?" Her lips twitched at the corners, but her tone was honest. "You're special." The words hung in the air just long enough to feel weighty before she added, "Mostly because you didn't ask for any of this. You didn't reach out for help. You reached out to a friend, and somehow you ended up here." Jack looked down. "Still feels like I don't belong." "You do," she said with quiet certainty. He glanced at her again, searching. "Why do I get the feeling this isn't just about the campaign?" Olivia hesitated. She hadn't told him yet. About the memory, about the roadside, about the way his quiet kindness years ago had been the spark that lit the fire she'd spent her career building. It wasn't time. Not yet. The moment was too tender, and she didn't want it to turn into something that would make him feel small. He didn't need to be told he had changed someone's life. He needed to believe he could change his own. Instead, she said, "Sometimes the world sends the right people back to you when you least expect it." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That sounds suspiciously like fate." "Maybe," she said with a half smile. "Or maybe just timing." Before either could say more, Olivia's assistant knocked gently on the door and stepped in. "Sorry to interrupt, but the media team needs Mr. Morgan for a quick photo session before lunch." Jack stood adjusting Ella, who blinked awake, and gave a soft whimper before snuggling against his chest again. "I'll see you after," he asked. "If you'd like to," Olivia replied. "I would." He left the room and Olivia remained seated, her eyes fixed on the doorway he'd just passed through. She'd told herself she wouldn't get attached, that this was just about making things right, about giving someone a platform who deserved it. But there was something about Jack, something steady and weather-worn, something deeply decent that kept drawing her in. He hadn't changed much. A few more lines on his face, a little less certainty in his stride, but the core of him, the quiet protector, the humble strength was still there. And he didn't remember her. Not yet. She didn't mind. She wasn't here to be remembered. She was here to remember for both of them. Jack spent the rest of the afternoon in a surreal state. The media team, though kind and professional, made him feel like he was being photographed for a magazine cover he didn't belong on. Ella was a natural, of course, smiling on cue, clutching the branded teething ring like it was a gold medal. At one point, the lead photographer said, "Hold her like you would if the world was falling apart, but she was the one thing holding you together." Jack blinked. "That's how I always hold her." Everyone fell silent for a beat. Then the shutter snapped. That photo, they would later say, was the one. In the early evening back at the hotel, Jack sat by the window, Ella napping in the travel crib beside him. The city buzzed below, but up here things were quiet. He looked out over the skyline, the setting sun casting gold against the glass and stone. And then his phone buzzed. A message from Olivia. "Thank you for today. I know it was a lot, but I hope you felt seen." Jack stared at the message, then typed back, "I haven't felt seen in a long time. But yeah, I did. Thank you." Another ping. "Do you have dinner plans?" He smiled. "You offering?" "There's a place down the block. Quiet, good food, kid-friendly, no cameras. Sounds perfect." 7 will be there. As he slipped the phone into his pocket, Jack looked over at Ella. She stirred and stretched, then settled back into sleep. Maybe this trip wasn't just about a campaign. Maybe it was about starting over. And this time not alone. The restaurant Olivia chose was tucked between a bookstore and a florist on a quiet West Side street, the kind of place that didn't need a sign because it had loyal customers and soft lighting that spilled through the windows like a promise. Jack arrived 5 minutes early, Ella bundled in a thick knit hat, her cheeks pink from the cold. A hostess greeted them warmly. "Table for Hanley," she asked, and Jack's brows ticked up slightly at the sound of Olivia's last name spoken aloud in public. "She's already here," the hostess added, leading him toward a small corner table where Olivia sat sipping tea, her phone face down, attention entirely on him as he approached. "You clean up well," she said with a smile. Jack looked down at his flannel shirt, clean, but definitely not high fashion, and chuckled. "You're generous," Ella gurgled on cue, drawing a grin from Olivia. "You must be the real star of the campaign," she said, reaching a hand toward the baby, who grabbed her finger without hesitation. "I think she likes you," Jack said, easing into the chair opposite. "I think she's the smartest person in the room," Olivia replied, her voice warm. They ordered quickly grilled salmon for Olivia, roast chicken for Jack, mashed sweet potatoes for Ella, courtesy of a small container Olivia had thoughtfully brought with her. It was all easy, natural. Too easy, Jack thought at moments, like he was sliding into something he hadn't realized he'd been craving: conversation without strain, attention without expectation. Still, there was a strange weight he couldn't shake, and it finally surfaced after dinner, when Ella had drifted off again in her carrier, and Jack leaned back in his chair. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "about how all of this started." Olivia tilted her head, alert. "You mean the campaign? No. The message." He met her eyes. "You didn't just reply. You didn't just help. You sent formula diapers, everything I needed before I even knew to ask. That wasn't a random act of kindness. That was personal." Olivia didn't answer immediately. Her fingers curled lightly around her teacup. And then Jack continued, voice lower. "There's the way you've handled this whole thing. How you've made sure I never felt like a charity case. How you talk to me like we've met before. Still no response. But something shifted in her expression, a flicker of hesitation. Jack leaned forward slightly. Have we? Olivia hesitated. Do you believe in full circles? She asked. Jack blinked. Like fate. Like cause and effect, with a long delay, she replied. Like maybe something small you did for someone a long time ago comes back when you least expect it. Jack's gaze sharpened. You're saying I did something for you? She smiled gently. You don't remember. That's okay. A beat passed. Then another. Finally, Olivia said, 15 years ago, I was 23. Fresh out of grad school. Lost in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey. Car broke down on the side of the road. I had no spare, no signal, no money, just panic. Jack's brows drew together. You pulled over in a beat-up blue pickup, Olivia said, her voice soft now. Didn't ask questions. Changed my tire. Topped off my radiator. You wouldn't take $1. You just said, when you're in a position to help someone else remember today. Silence fell like snow. Jack sat frozen, his mind swimming backward. The memory was faint, but it was there, an exhausted young woman in a pencil skirt and heels, waving frantically from the shoulder of a two-lane road. He hadn't thought about it in years, hadn't known her name. That was you, Olivia nodded. I never forgot. Jack leaned back slowly, the revelation pressing into his chest like a tide he hadn't seen coming. I didn't think twice, he said. That day, I mean. I did, she replied. That night I stayed in a motel and wrote your name in my journal. And 10 years later, when I had enough influence to start my first outreach fund, I called it Morgan's Circle. You never knew, but you were the reason I started helping people quietly. Directly, personally. Jack stared at her, overwhelmed. I thought I was helping a stranger, he said, his voice almost a whisper. You were, she said. But that stranger never stopped carrying your kindness. The emotion rose fast in his throat. He looked down at Ella, then back up. I'm not sure I know how to process this. You don't have to, Olivia replied gently. This isn't a debt to repay. This is a moment to recognize. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. You really remembered me all these years. You reminded me of who I wanted to become. That silenced him again, and not for the first time that day. They paid the bill and stepped out into the chilled New York air. The sidewalks damp from earlier rain lights shimmering in the puddles. They walked slowly, Ella snuggled close to Jack's chest. So what now, he asked, more to himself than her. I don't know, Olivia said, but I think there's more to this story than a campaign. And more to you than what anyone has seen yet. Jack looked at her, really looked, and saw not a CEO, not a benefactor, but a woman who had once been broken and had chosen to build something beautiful out of the cracks. And maybe he could too. Would you mind, he asked quietly, if I stayed in touch? Olivia's smile was soft and steady. I was hoping you would. And as they walked back toward the hotel, their steps side by side, something unspoken settled between them. Not finished, not yet defined, but deeply rooted. Whatever had begun with a text message with a wrong number and a box on a porch was no longer just coincidence. It was connection, and it was only beginning. Central Park wore the soft colors of late February, gray skies, bare branches, and the tentative scent of spring riding beneath the cold. It was Olivia's idea to go for a walk to give Ella some fresh air before the last stretch of interviews. Jack agreed more for the chance to steal another moment alone with her than anything else. He pushed Ella's stroller slowly down the winding path, careful not to jostle her as she drifted in and out of sleep. Olivia walked beside him, hands tucked into the pockets of a camel-colored coat, her expression calm but unreadable. Neither spoke much at first. It wasn't uncomfortable. The silence felt earned, companionable, the kind that came after something had shifted, but neither party wanted to prod it too hard. So Jack said at last, what happens after all this? The campaign, I mean. Olivia glanced over at him. Well, your story goes live in a couple of weeks. We're pairing it with a new father-focused program, Financial Guidance Parental Support Services. Your voice will be front and center. Jack laughed quietly. Never thought I'd be the face of fatherhood. You're not, Olivia said. You're the heart of it. The compliment hit harder than it should have. Jack looked away, watching a flock of pigeons scatter as a jogger passed. You know, he said, I've spent the better part of the last year feeling like I was failing. Every day felt like a scramble to prove I was enough for Ella for myself. It wasn't until your message that I realized, maybe it wasn't about being perfect. Maybe it was just about showing up. Olivia nodded slowly. Showing up is everything. Jack stopped the stroller near a bench and motioned toward it. Want to sit? They settled into the bench, Ella still snoozing softly under her blanket. Olivia turned toward him slightly, folding one leg beneath her. I don't mean to pry, Jack said, but earlier at dinner, you said something about helping me, because someone helped you once. You were talking about me, obviously, but were there others? Olivia hesitated. Her gaze drifted toward the path ahead. Yeah, she said finally. There were a few. A foster mother when I was 10 who read to me every night even when I refused to answer her. A guidance counselor who paid for my college application fees out of her own pocket. And you. That roadside afternoon, what you did, it was the first time I saw kindness without expectation. Jack's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say to that. You didn't remember me, she continued, but I remembered everything. How calm you were. How you didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing how to change a tire. You just fixed it. Then you disappeared. I didn't mean to disappear, Jack said. I didn't think it was anything big. It was everything, Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a long moment. The city moved around them, dog walkers, couples, the occasional tour group, shuffling past with cameras, but they remained still, an invisible bubble drawn tight around the bench. Jack turned toward her. Olivia, he said slowly, I didn't come here expecting anything. I didn't even know what this was. But being around you these past few days talking like this, it's different. Feels like there's something more. She met his gaze, eyes clear but soft. There is, he exhaled. You sure you're this powerhouse CEO, and I'm a guy with a rusted-out truck and a daughter who thinks my hoodie is a chew toy? Olivia smiled, and this time it wasn't guarded or polite. It was full open. I'm not looking for polish, she said. I've had enough of that. I'm looking for something real. And with you, Jack, everything feels real. For a moment, he didn't respond. Then instinctively, he reached out slowly, respectfully, and let the back of his fingers graze hers. She didn't pull away. The contact was small, almost nothing, but it hummed with something ancient and human and powerful recognition. Not of who they had been, but of who they could become together. They walked back toward the hotel as dusk fell, the city beginning to glow with its nightly rhythm of yellow and neon. Olivia held Ella in her arms now, the baby's head tucked under her chin, and Jack walked beside them, quiet but brimming. At the crosswalk, they paused. Olivia turned to him. You know, she said, I never thought I'd want any of this. Family, soft things. But lately, I've been rethinking what success looks like. Jack raised an eyebrow. And maybe it's not a boardroom. Maybe it's a front porch, a dog, a high chair at the end of the table. Jack smiled. And someone to hold the baby when you burn dinner. She laughed, bright and real. Exactly. The light turned green and they crossed. But something had already shifted between them, more permanent than flirtation, deeper than gratitude. They had found each other in the middle of separate storms. And for the first time in a long time, the sky above both of them felt clear. Back in the hotel lobby, as Olivia handed Ella back to Jack, their hands touched again, just a brush. But Jack held her gaze. Whatever this is, he said, I'm willing to see where it goes. So am I, Olivia said. But no pressure. Let's take it slow. Jack grinned. Slow is good. I've got diapers to change anyway. She smiled again, and this time it reached all the way to her eyes. As Jack turned to the elevator, Ella snuggled against his shoulder, and Olivia watched them go, with a look that said she wasn't just watching a man walk away, she was watching something begin. Jack had never seen so many emails in his life. His phone buzzed almost nonstop from the moment the campaign teaser went live. It wasn't just attention, it was momentum. Messages from other single parents poured in. Men who had spent years being told to toughen up. Fathers who worked 2 jobs and still felt like they were never doing enough. Some wrote just to say thank you. Others asked how they could help or where to turn. Jack read each one slowly, carefully. He responded when he could with the same humility he'd always lived by. He didn't feel like a role model. He still wrestled with money exhaustion, self-doubt. But now he knew something that changed everything. He wasn't alone. In the middle of it all came another email, this time directly from Olivia. Jack, I've been thinking. What would you say to coming on board in a more permanent way? Not just the campaign, something longer term. We're launching a new fatherhood outreach program, Real Stories, Real Support. I'd like you to be the face of it and the voice behind it. It wouldn't be corporate. You'd help shape the tone, guide the content. We'll train you, support you, whatever you need. No pressure. But I think you're the kind of man people want to hear from. Let me know what you think. Olivia. Jack stared at the screen for a long time. Then he set the phone down, stood from the couch and paced. It sounded incredible. The kind of opportunity that didn't just fall from the sky. And yet, there was something terrifying about it. He'd spent so long keeping things small, manageable. The idea of stepping into the spotlight, even for a cause he believed in, felt like trying on clothes 2 sizes too big. Ella sat on the carpet nearby, chewing on a block and babbling to herself, completely unfazed. Jack ran a hand through his hair. What if he wasn't enough? What if he failed in front of all those people? What if he embarrassed Olivia? He almost typed, "Thank you, but I can't." But something stopped him. Instead, he stepped outside. The air in New York had softened. The chill was still there, but spring was whispering in the breeze. Jack walked a block, then 2, pushing Ella in her stroller. He found a park bench near a patch of daffodils just beginning to bloom. A man with a toddler on his hip passed by and nodded. Jack nodded back. Then a woman jogged past with a stroller and gave him a thumbs up. He blinked, surprised. Did they recognize him from the campaign trailer, maybe? Or maybe it was just a little more visibility, now people seeing single dads as more than background players. He pulled out his phone again and scrolled through the messages. One caught his eye. Jack, my son's mother left when he was 2. I've been raising him alone ever since. Your story made me feel seen for the first time. I didn't even know I needed that. Thank you. Jack exhaled emotion catching somewhere beneath his ribs. He looked down at Ella, who grinned up at him through milk-stained lips. Think Daddy can do this? He whispered. Ella blew a raspberry. Jack laughed. That settled it. He met Olivia in the corner cafe 2 blocks from headquarters. The same table, the same gentle lighting. She was already there when he walked in, laptop open, a mug of tea steaming beside her. When she saw him, her face lit up, not the curated media smile, but the one that came only when she forgot to guard it. Hey, she said, standing to greet him. Jack didn't sit right away. He stood there for a moment, hands in the pockets of his coat, gaze steady. I want to say yes, he told her, to the offer, but only if I can do it the way I know how. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Define that. I'm not polished. I don't have media training. I'm not a brand. You're a voice, she said, and a heart. The rest we can work with. Jack nodded slowly. Then I'm in, she smiled. Good. Because I already drafted your first blog post title, Fatherhood, the Job with No Sick Days. Jack chuckled. That's scarily accurate. They sat, talked, planned. By the time they finished, 2 hours had passed and the sun had begun to slide behind the buildings outside. Can I ask you something? Jack said, pausing as she packed up her laptop. Of course. Why me beyond the tire? Beyond the message? Why did you let this become something personal? Olivia looked at him for a long time. Because you remind me of everything I forgot when I started chasing success, she said softly. You grounded me. You made me remember why I started. And somewhere along the way, you made me feel like I didn't have to carry the whole world alone. Jack said nothing for a moment. Then you don't. Their eyes held. And somewhere beneath the words, between heartbeats and hesitant smiles, something unspoken but undeniable moved closer to becoming real. That night, Jack returned to the hotel and drafted his first blog post. He wrote slowly, carefully, his words raw but sincere. No one trains you for this. There's no manual for holding a screaming baby at 2 a.m. while the power's out and the fridge is empty. No script for pretending you're not scared when you are. But if you're reading this and you're tired and you're worried you're not enough, I want you to know something. You are. You're showing up. That counts more than you think. It did for me. He hit save, then looked over at Ella, asleep now in her portable crib, her fingers curled into tiny fists. His world wasn't perfect, but it was growing. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just surviving. He was choosing to stay, to build something bigger than fear, to begin again. The event hall shimmered with soft gold lighting and understated elegance. No stage lights, no flashing cameras, just warm wooden floors, floor-to-ceiling windows and round tables filled with families, community leaders and staff. The first annual Voices of Real Families gathering had begun. Jack stood behind the curtain, adjusting the collar of his borrowed blazer. He hadn't worn a suit in nearly a decade, and even now this one belonged to the wardrobe department, neatly pressed and a half-inch too short in the sleeves. But it didn't matter. No one was here for fashion. They were here for stories. He looked down at Ella in her car seat beside him. She was wearing a soft ivory dress with little embroidered flowers and gripping her favorite rubber giraffe like it was the key to the world. "You good kiddo," he whispered. Ella responded with a contented sigh and kicked her feet. A staff member approached with a gentle nod. "You're up in 2 minutes, Mr. Morgan." Jack gave a thumbs up that probably looked more confident than he felt. He glanced once more at Olivia, who stood across the room watching from behind a partition. She looked radiant, not in the way CEOs usually did, but in the way people look when they've chosen authenticity over image. Their eyes met. She gave him a nod, one that didn't say good luck, but "You've got this." Jack exhaled, then stepped out into the light. He walked up to the small podium, cleared his throat, and looked out at the audience. Some faces were familiar fellow campaign participants, team members, even a few folks from his neighborhood who'd made the trip. But most were strangers. Still, he wasn't nervous. He was ready. "Hi, I'm Jack Morgan," he began, voice steady. "Some of you know me from a blog post about fatherhood. Some of you might have seen a video, or maybe nothing at all. That's okay. I'm not here because I'm famous. I'm here because I got lucky enough to send a text to the wrong number." Laughter rippled through the room, warm and welcoming. "I didn't mean to start a movement. I meant to borrow $40 to buy formula. But what I found instead was something I thought I'd lost hope." He paused, let the silence land. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who's had to figure things out one day at a time. Who held a baby through nights when I couldn't sleep and stood in grocery store aisles doing math with a calculator app. I've messed up. I've doubted myself. I've wondered if I'm enough." He looked down at Ella, now wide-eyed and alert. "But I keep showing up. That's the job. That's the magic. Not being perfect. Just showing up." He scanned the crowd, locking eyes with a young dad in the second row, a woman holding a child in the back, an older couple dabbing their eyes. "I'm here today because one stranger believed in me. She didn't ask for proof. She didn't need a backstory. She just heard someone trying, and she answered." He looked toward Olivia, who met his gaze with quiet intensity. "Her name is Olivia Hanley. You probably know her as the CEO of this company. But I know her as something much more important, the person who reminded me that kindness still exists, that second chances can start with the smallest acts, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the people we help end up saving us." The applause was quiet at first, then it built steady and genuine until it filled the room. Jack didn't bow. He just stepped away from the podium, picked up Ella, and held her close. The rest of the evening passed in a warm blur, handshakes, hugs, soft music, the clinking of glasses. Jack had never been part of anything like it. Not a wedding, not a fundraiser, not a corporate gala. It was something in between, something better. Later, when the crowd had thinned and the caterers were clearing tables, he found himself standing with Olivia near the terrace overlooking the park. The air was cool but gentle, the city quieting as lights blinked on across the skyline. "That was beautiful," Olivia said. "You made half the room cry." Jack smiled. "I'll bill you for the tissues." She laughed softly, then grew quiet. "Thank you," she said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For everything. For being brave. For being honest. For stepping into something even when you were terrified." Jack looked out at the horizon. "I think I spent so many years keeping my head down, I forgot what it was like to look forward." "You're looking now," Olivia said. He turned to her. "I don't want this to end when I go back home." "It doesn't have to," she said gently. There it was. No dramatic confession, no sweeping declaration, just a door quietly opening. Jack stepped closer. "You said you didn't think you'd ever want a family," he murmured. Still feel that way, Olivia smiled soft, open, without fear. I said I never thought I'd want that version of a family. But this you, Ella, whatever we build from here, I want it. I want us. Jack reached for her hand. Their fingers met laced, and that was all the answer either of them needed. 6 months later, Jack's blog had grown into a national column. The Morgan Circle program was fully funded, operating in 10 cities. Olivia had scaled back her hours not out of fatigue, but to make space for herself for joy, for evenings spent reading books aloud with Ella on her lap, and Jack cooking dinner in the kitchen. There were no grand fairy tales, no fireworks, just steady love, built one moment at a time. And on the kitchen wall of their new home in upstate New York, framed in simple walnut wood, hung the original note Olivia had once written and left inside that box. Take care of your daughter. I'll take care of the rest. Oh, next to it, taped just below, was Jack's first blog post. Between them hung not just paper but a story, of a wrong number, of a forgotten kindness, of two lives that collided not by chance, but by grace. Where in the world are you watching from? I'd love to know. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts about today's story. If this touched your heart or reminded you that kindness still matters, don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting stories just like this one. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the good.